So processing to preserve, essentially, is not problematic. And the key differentiator is that it still looks like the food that it is. So like a frozen spinach or a frozen berry still looks like a berry or a spinach leaf. They don't have the industrial additives, which we sometimes call them cosmetic additives, because they don't do anything good. They're just there to like make it look better or taste sweeter. And they're not sold. And they're not processed to make them hyper palatable. So they're not processed to like make them quicker and easier to eat.
Right. I think a important distinction that you've made before, and something that I was pretty surprised by, because it seems like the words are used interchangeably, is ultra processed versus processed. Yeah. Right. And I think you mentioned it before in the NOVA classification. Yeah. But can you please expand on that a little bit to give us a better understanding? Yeah.
So it's going back to our corn, right? So the processing that takes place to take the kernels off the cob and like boil them up and put them in a tin. That's a process, and it's industrial. It happens in factories. But the end product is the kernels of the cob in a tin, maybe with some brine, or sometimes not, sometimes just water, and that's it. So when you eat them, the food matrix hasn't been altered. Like they've been taken off the cob, but the actual kernels are intact. Right. They've been boiled and maybe salted, but they haven't had any emulsifiers put in. There's no sweeteners. There's no artificial colorings or flavorings. So what really differentiates processed foods is actually being just foods that are made easier to consume and that can be stored for longer, because your tinned corn is going to last months, but your fresh corn, you got to eat it, otherwise it'll go moldy. So those foods aren't a problem. And it's important that we make that clear, because for a lot of people, when I say like eat more fruits and vegetables, they're expensive, but frozen fruits aren't. Right. Frozen berries are a fraction of the cost of a fresh berry. Yeah. So, and that's processing, freezing something. Yeah. So processing to preserve, essentially, is not problematic. And the key differentiator is that it still looks like the food that it is. So like a frozen spinach or a frozen berry still looks like a berry or a spinach leaf. They don't have the industrial additives, which we sometimes call them cosmetic additives, because they don't do anything good. They're just there to like make it look better or taste sweeter. And they're not sold. And they're not processed to make them hyper palatable. So they're not processed to like make them quicker and easier to eat. Right. And those foods, and they are used interchangeably, and it's not useful actually, because you don't want people to be scared of tinned food. Or like dried whole grains.
Right. Or anything frozen.
Or anything frozen. Foods, right? The frozen food aisle is really useful.
It's a reasonable solution, especially for people that they can't buy produce because it goes bad too quick, and they need something a little bit more sustainable when they're having to feed a family, or even from like a high level public health view. Yeah. Right. 100%. When we're thinking about how do we create any sort of public health change in regards to avoiding ultra processed foods, I think processed foods are pretty reasonable.
Part of the answer. So it reduces food waste as well. Right. Because as you said, like if you're eating your corn, you will eat what you need from the tin corn, and you're not throwing away the fresh stuff that you didn't eat. Or I mean raspberries, how quickly do they go off? I don't buy them fresh anymore, because I'm like, next day they're fairy. I'm like, why? Yeah. So and actually, if you want to eat organic food, frozen organic is so much more affordable, right? And in terms of nutrient profile, often the frozen foods retain their polyphenol and vitamin content better, because freezing helps that process. So if you have a berry that's like traveled 1,000 miles and then been in a van, and then like the polyphenols and vitamins are quite fragile, so they start to degrade pretty quickly. And frozen foods are often frozen on the field. So you actually have like more punch in them.
Picked and frozen.
Yeah.